welcome you this evening. All that's joined us so far. We may have several more that will log in here in the next minute or two as we're getting started. My name is Tim Cole, and I'm the Executive Director of Waypoint Church Partners. And Waypoint exists to serve established churches in the Waypoint region, which is Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina now a little bit. And so we try and serve them in strategic services to help them get on mission and stay on mission. And then we also get the opportunity to start some new churches, a couple every year. This year, we've helped start already a church outside of Bristol, Virginia. And then we've got one starting this fall in Goldsboro, North Carolina. They had a practice service just yesterday, their second preview service. And I texted the church planter today to see how it went, and he didn't reply. So either he's taking the day off or he's just completely whooped from having his first preview or second preview service, one or the other. But two good churches that are partnering churches are helping us to start this year. But on the strategic services side, our Waypoint 55 webinar series was started 4 years ago to help particularly target lay leaders in the church in different key areas to help the lay leaders get their ministries on mission and stay on mission. So that may be elders, it may be mission committee chairmen or mission committee members, it may be youth or children's ministry workers. But a couple times a year, we try to focus on prayer ministries and how we can help those who are trying to be the champion for the prayer ministry at their church to have creative and good ideas for how they can really broaden the prayer ministry, the scope of prayer covering at their church. And so that's the focus of our webinar tonight. And so I'm going to share the screen here just for a second, reshare the screen. And I want to start off with, as we do every month, to thank our sponsor, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, our ministry partner since the very beginning. And they help us do exactly what we're doing here, is we're navigating ministry together. And so we're trying to help churches navigate each of these areas, whether it's safety and security in your church, or first impressions, or these other areas to navigate. How do we get from where we are to where we need to go in a wise way to steward our time and our resources? The last couple of months, we've had great webinars. The last month was one for men's ministry and what some churches are doing that are really working in their church. And so if you missed that one, you may want to go to our YouTube channel to pick that up. And the one we had before that was safety in your church for your children and youth, and what are the kind of the standards for making sure your kids are safe on your property. And so we have a YouTube channel that's, if you Google or if you search on YouTube for Waypoint Church Partners, you'll find our channel. And what we want to highlight is that we've got playlists where all the different categories of webinars that we've done for the last 40 years have been cataloged into playlists. And so there's a playlist just of the safety and security that we've done, a couple per year. There's one just for elders, one just for children's and youth workers, for example. And so there's also a playlist for the prayer seminars that we have done. And so we've got 4 of those on our YouTube channel that you can go and watch on demand whenever you're ready to see those. I want to highlight the one that here is with Dyke McCord that we did. I don't remember when we did that one. You would think we'd have the date there, but it was some really great stuff that churches are doing, particularly about creating a prayer experience at their church and a dedicated prayer room, and how one church has outfitted a prayer room in a very special way to enhance the prayer experience at their church. And so if you would go to our YouTube channel, the Waypoint 55, and then look for the playlist for prayer ministry, you'll find that one and others. But what I want to do tonight is I want to introduce Neil Wheeler, who is our Director of Leader Care at Waypoint. And so he spends the bulk of his time literally doing that, trying to care for leaders around our region. But then one of his focuses of ministry is leading churches to have a great prayer emphasis, a prayer empowered ministry, and he does retreats and training seminars on how to do that. So he was the ideal person to ask to lead this webinar tonight about prayer elements at conventions that can naturally work even at your local church. And so I'm going to pass the baton on to Neil now to get us started. And we're going to talk about some of those things that we see. And hopefully, if not one, maybe two or three or four of the ideas that you would hear tonight, you'd think, well, we could do that at our church as well. So Neil, we're glad to have you here. And I'm going to be introducing Mark as well in just a little while. But Neil, go ahead and kick off the webinar this evening.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate so much the chance to be able to join all of you folks tonight for this webinar. Every time I have a chance to be able to talk with leaders or churches about developing a prayer empowered ministry, it really excites me. For the last 25 years, that's really been a major focus of my ministry. I actually had a minister friend of mine start that thought in my mind by asking me one time, Neil, what are you doing to just encourage the Lord to be present at your church? And I had to say, well, nothing, but I want to learn what that's all about. And through a lot of months, actually years of study and reading, I realized the important part that prayer has to do with invoking the Lord's presence when we gather together. And tonight we just want to talk about some practical convention prayer elements that we've seen. And I'm joined on a call with two really good buddies, my boss, Tim Cole, of course, and then also Mark Coffey, who is recently retired from ministry here in the greater Richmond area. I was just thinking a few minutes ago, all three of us preached same time here in Richmond, and we were great buddies then. And we were in the same fusion group together for a time. And so it's good to be with you. I was thinking earlier, and we were calculating the number of conventions that collectively we had been to, conventions or seminars or that sort of thing. And we figured that it was in excess of 300 probably. And it almost sounds like, yeah, that's all we've ever done is go to conventions. But I asked just a little bit ago, when we first started our call together, how many years have we had in ministry collectively? And 122 years of ministry. Now, I am sure that Mark Coffey has the lion's share of those because Tim and I, we're in our early 30s. And so just joking with you, Mark, but we've had a lot of experience at conventions. The thing about going to conventions, we've all been there. We've all seen great music. We've all seen great videos. We've all heard great worship, great preaching. And we've come away saying, man, I could do something like that at my place. Well, tonight what we want to do is talk about what we've seen at conventions in relationship to prayer that are very transferable to our own churches. And we'll talk about that. And I just want to encourage you that if you're on the call and you have a suggestion of something that you've seen in regard to prayer at a convention or conference that you've been to, that you just click on the question button at the bottom of your screen and describe that just a little bit. And we'll try to share some of those things as we move along. I thought to get us started, perhaps a great place for a start would be just describing the first convention or conference that we remember going to, and then specifically the first prayer emphasis at a convention or conference that we remember. So Mark, I'm going to throw it at you. Do you remember way back the very first conference or seminar or convention that you ever went to?
Back 120 years ago?
Yeah.
When you asked that question, the first thing that popped in my mind was a CIY conference. I was there as a youth minister with my youth group, and lo and behold, there was somebody up on stage that was a person that we had, in a previous ministry, we had prayed earnestly for. They had a very checkered past. They had been through all sorts of different things. And this will date it, but this girl was signing Friends Are Friends Forever If the Lord's the Lord of Them with Michael W. Smith. And I just burst into tears because this was a person that we had prayed earnestly for. And here she was in Bible college. Here she was training to be a missionary, and was going to get married shortly thereafter, and they were going to go on the mission field. So, and it was just a very stirring time.
That's really, really strong. Tim, how about you? First conference you remember attending,
Yeah, I
perhaps?
remember very distinctly. It was an old North American Christian convention. I believe it was 1970. My wife and I met at the North American Christian Convention in St. Louis, and we were in the 3-year-old nursery together. And we didn't realize this until we'd been married several years. And I was telling about getting one of the biggest whoopings in my life at that convention, because after the main session, um, my mom had come to pick me up, but she ran into some friends. And so, you know how parents are talking. And I saw these kids back in the nursery that were on the trampolines, getting to jump on the trampolines. And so I was begging my mom, yanking on her to let me go play on the trampolines as well. And she was saying, no, 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 no. And so I pitched a fit, laid on the ground and flopped around like a fish. And so that convention center has those jet walks that go between over the road to the next building over. And my mom took me out into the jet walk and gave me a whooping that I remember still to this day. And I was telling that story, and lo and behold, the 3 kids that were back in the back of the nursery, one of them was my wife, Lisa. And so she caused me to get one of the most memorable whoopings in my life at the age of 3 years old at the North American Christian Convention. And somehow we're still together today. But my family was the kind of family that even as lay people, my parents were not in vocational ministry. We would go to the North American Christian Convention to be equipped as key lay leaders in our church.
Wow, that's really cool. I remember the very first convention that I ever gone to. It was actually the precursor to Waypoint. Back in the day, we were called the VEF, Virginia Evangelizing Fellowship. And I remember I was told that I went to the very first VEF rally when I was 2 years old. I don't remember that. Tim, I got you beat by a year then, a conference going. I don't remember that conference, but my mom, single mom, was someone who loved the church, wanted to make sure that we were at church when church was open, and she loved the VEF back then. She really loved the VEF. And so I fell in love with the VEF from a very, very early age. But the very first prayer element that I remember at a conference, it was at a CIY, was at a Southern Christian Youth Convention, I think in Louisville. I don't recall. I don't remember anything about the convention necessarily. That's not what stood out in my mind. I just remember one of those post sessions that it felt like 200 kids were crammed in a hotel room, and some guy was playing guitar and singing songs. And I had never heard people pray with more intensity. And I was like 15 years old, probably. And that was really strong in my memory. And so not everything that we remember or prayer elements, I think, have to be in a main session. Oftentimes they're what happened in a hallway or in a hotel room or something like that. Well, again, I'd love for you to you folks that are listening, chime in with some things that you've seen. But we want to kind of go round robin and just talk about some elements that we've actually seen and put in practice in our own memories, ministries. Tim, I'll let you go first on this. Why don't you share a prayer element that you've seen?
Well, one of the ones that the first prayer element that I would remember at a convention was about 20 years ago. I was working one of my first years for the VEF at that time. And so we had a booth that was the VEF was doing, and the booth next to ours was on the end cap. And I don't remember what organization it was, but they had set up like a hut from Africa that theoretically looked like a hut. I've never been to Africa, so I don't know if it looked legit or not. But theoretically, it was a hut. But they also had, and I don't know how they got away with this, but they had like this burning incense with smoke that would come out of it periodically on the hour, and it was a call to prayer, and people would come into the hut, and you'd pray for the tribes around that. I think it might have been Kenya. I'm not sure. But regardless, I was in the booth next door. And so the first couple of hours, I'd look over and see smoke coming over the top of our booth. And I was like, something's on fire. But this is the principle that's important, I think, for this webinar is now every time I smell incense, I'm reminded of that convention and the call to prayer. And I think that's an important lesson we can learn about prayer elements is to use as many senses as possible. And smell is one of the most dramatic senses that you can use for your memory. It's like my dad growing up smoked a pipe, and he had a cherry blend tobacco that he always used. And now in my adulthood, my dad's been gone for 30 years, but if I smell a cherry blend pipe, it takes me right back to remember my dad. And in the same way, that smoke and the incense from that hut. And I have seen in other conventions, youth conventions, where that has been an element that was replicated, where there was a hut set up that kids could go in and pray, but pray specifically for the people group that would have been in that kind of a setting.
Wow, that is that's really, really cool. And when you were talking about the sense of smell, I remember this had nothing to do with prayer. I don't think it was. I was preaching on the bread of life one Sunday morning, and so I had a couple of ladies with their bread machines bake bread, and we had kind of timed it so that when church was getting strong, along in church, people were smelling baked bread. I remember that, so I could only imagine how impactful that smell was to you. Mark, how about you, buddy?
Just a couple of things come to mind. One comes from being involved with ICOM and an international conference on missions. And as we were walking through one time, we came across the wall of unreached people groups. And I found out that Team Expansion provided those walls for churches to use. And I was going through a series on prayer, and we set that up in our Family Life Center, and allowed people and dismissed people from the church service to be able to go there and to pray for the various people groups. But the other one came from a conference that I attended down at Compassion Christian, where Cam Huxford is. And during that conference, they had set up huge chalkboards on the sides of their worship center for people to write down their prayers. And I love the idea. And I came back and I talked to one of our guys and I said, hey, can we do something like this? And he took it and ran with it and gave it his own meaning and interpretation. And it turned out to be a work of art. And there is a prayer wall over at Mechanicsville Church of Christ that some people have probably seen during elder conferences and what have you, that is there, and it's basically patterned somewhat after the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. And so what we would do during our services or at the end of our services is that we would challenge people if they had a prayer request or if they had to pray for somebody or any kind of need, but they weren't comfortable coming forward to pray about it, that they could go back and there were pieces of paper and they could write them down. And just like in the Wailing Wall, you can stick something into the crevices. There are slots where you can put those pieces of paper. And then throughout the week, we had people who would come and pray over those prayer requests and those needs and those various things like that. It was very impactful.
Mark, I've been to your church many times and have been there for worship, and it was fascinating to watch people peel off and go to the back and place something there, prayer requests in the wall, and and stay to pray with basically their back to the rest of the auditorium and to whoever would happen to be on stage at the time. And I just love that. It was just a great work of art and as well, but it was a very meaningful a prayer location in your church. That was really, really cool. Let's talk for a few minutes about, go back to the wall of unreached people groups. Tim, maybe you can pull that slide back up and
Yep.
focus down on this. I do not recall, and I've was really impressed by this at a North American, maybe in Cincinnati. I can't remember the first time that I had seen this in team expansion. I was just beginning to understand unreached people groups, and that there were nearly 7,000 people groups in the world that had not been reached with the gospel as of yet. And you have just a few of those panels. There are, I don't know, a couple or 3 dozen of those panels, if I remember. When we had them, when I was preaching at Chester, we encircled our whole worship room with it, and perhaps even in the lobby we had to add some others, but we did as well during worship. We just let people go and pray and think and look and be captured by a location for whatever reason and a thought. I remember the first time I ever saw this, as I said, it was at a North American, and I think it's Cincinnati. That for whatever reason, I do not know why, I was drawn toward Indonesia. Had no reason to know why, but I prayed specifically over Indonesia and prayed for a couple of specific groups in Indonesia, and I had no idea that many years later, about 3 years ago, I serve on my home church, Fairmount Christian Church, on our world mission or world impact team. And I had the opportunity to go with a couple other Fairmounters to go to Indonesia. And it was a fascinating thing that kind of came full circle back around. So what a great, great experience. Tim, have you had anything similar to that with the Unreached People Group wall?
Well, just a little bit. And that was number one, going to an event like ICOM that's focused on missions and global outreach. But we took a team of our brand new church 20 years ago of missions interested people in our new church. They'd never been to a convention of any kind like that before, but we were challenged. We did not yet have a missionary, and we were challenged to don't pick a missionary, pick an unreached people group, then find a missionary who's called to reach that group. And so our church did that. We picked out and pray. We had a team pray for probably a year. Lord, show us a people group anywhere in the world, and we're open to anyone. And end up with a small people group up in the northern mountains of Laos. And so we adopted that people group, and then found a missionary who was going there from Ozark Christian College to be a missionary to reach that people group. And so it was really an impact on these people that were new to church, that they could pray for something and the Holy Spirit would open the door for exactly what they were praying for. And we learned that at a convention where that was encouraged, was pray for it in this way. And so taking people with you on these conventions can really help you have a bigger picture of what you might do at your church.
There's no question about that. I just share another idea that I saw and joined in with someone somewhere, one of the conventions. I do not even remember where it was. I think it's probably North American. And that was prayer walking. I had never done prayer walking before. Didn't even know what it was. But they shared that we were going, there were going to be a group of people go and prayer walk a certain neighborhood in the city that we were in. And I don't remember whether I signed up. Anyway, I remember getting on a bus and we went and we literally prayer walked the neighborhood. And we would pause at corners, and several of us would pray together, and we walk further and pause and pray again together. And I thought, I can do that. I could make that happen. And in the church I was preaching at, we had a group of folks that would pray every Saturday morning and every Sunday morning, 6 o'clock, both mornings. And we had a good group of people. I won't lie to anybody. We didn't have, 3/4 of our church. We didn't even have a tenth of our church, but we had a group of people that went every morning. I do want to share one story about that. The impact on praying for neighborhoods. We prayed for schools. We prayer walked the schools that we were renting for some time, parks, neighborhoods. We really tried to focus on high risk areas in our community. And the reality is, no matter what the income level is, every neighborhood's a high risk neighborhood of difficulty and trouble, especially now post COVID. But we selected one neighborhood. Actually, it was a mobile home park on one thoroughfare in our town, and we prayed at a Hardee's nearby. We just would meet up for several of us meet up for iced tea in the afternoon and pray. And we get our iced tea, we pray together, and the prayer was simply, God, what would you have us do, and where would you want us to do it? And after some months, and it wasn't a week, it wasn't 2 weeks, it was several months. We kind of together got the idea of a specific trailer park, and we went and asked permission. How can we help you? And that opened the door to just tremendous ministry for a couple of years in that area. I do have to say this. Because we had some success there, we had another mobile home park say, hey, would you come over and do the same thing at our place? We'd do bouncy toys and carnival stuff and hot dogs and all that kind of stuff. And I think we kind of had too much pride. We were probably too big for our britches. And because we didn't pray not a minute. We just said, sure, we're in, we'll come. And that fell flatter than flat. It just didn't work out at all. And so that was that prayer walking neighborhoods was something that I learned, and that is very transferable. It doesn't matter the size of your church or the size of your prayer team. 2 or 3 or a half a dozen could do that. But what I have learned, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's not like a one and done. What we found was that praying regularly at the same place for the same purpose over a period of months really built into fruitful ministry. Mark, how about you? Do you have another idea you'd like to share?
You mean ideas as far as doing things around the neighborhood and everything like that?
No. Just what ideas that you've seen at conventions. We can go totally a whole new direction if you like to. Whatever you'd like to do.
Well, one of the things that I've been excited about is with International Conference on Missions coming up. There have been different other things that are opening up as for us, and these things are also very highly transferable. But one of the things that the church that I've served at is currently doing those kind of prayer walks. We have Mechanicsville Church of Christ has a Christian school that meets on campus. And one of the things that happens every year is that people will walk around the building, 7 times symbolically, just to remind us of Joshua and claiming what will be taking place in that place to be of the Lord and for the Lord. But they also go down to the local elementary school just down the road, and they do the very same thing. And they have adopted the local elementary school, and Will Pinnell, the current minister, has done a masterful job with this, and they've adopted that school, and they not only pray over it, but then they go in and they'll have a special treat for the teachers and staff, or they will offer a meal for them and grill hamburgers or drop donuts and coffee off, at to the various teachers in throughout the campus, and just not only pray for, but also minister to, as you were talking about the trailer courts, and the appreciation level is just off the charts, and the open doors that have come on that from that is incredible.
Yeah, Mark, the numbers, as we went into COVID and we kept hearing the numbers of people that were sick with COVID and have died in hospital, and I don't diminish any of those things. I have 10 friends, pastor friends, who have lost either death to them or someone in their immediate family. So I'm not diminishing that at all. But from very early on, I began wondering, what are going to be the emotional ramifications and the mental ramifications of that? And the CDC has said prior to COVID, about 11% of our population dealt either with clinical depression or major anxiety issues. Now, post-COVID, that number's at 42%. Prayer opportunity to be able to think about people's needs. Where there's pain, that equals open doors to opportunity. I think prayer, that's what that is about. Praying, saying, God, show us help us understand what we can do as a church. Hey, we got one great idea from my buddy Ed Wyatt down at Colonial Heights in Norfolk. He just shared that he said, we have a prayer map of the community around our church on our prayer room wall, and pray for the needs in our community. And I think that's just a great idea. And that's very, very transferable to just about any church. That's super. Tim, how about you? Do you have another prayer concept?
Yeah,
that you've
I've
seen?
got three or four, but two of them kind of go together. They're similar, same idea, different applications, but both of them were at conventions. Both of them, I remember where I was when I heard them. One was in a workshop at ICOM. I believe it was 2010 in Atlanta, or 2011, whenever it was in Atlanta, but I went to a workshop during the afternoon. The idea was to set an alarm on your phone. So 10 years ago, we were just getting to a point where we had smartphones and you could set alarms. And that one, I believe it was 9:38 every day. So, the Matthew 9:38, pray the Lord of the harvest to give us workers to go into the mission field. And so you set an alarm to go off on your phone and to pray for the Lord of the harvest for workers at 9:38 every morning, or every Saturday morning, or every Sunday morning, or whatever it was. And I used that at my church, multiple different applications for different times or different things that we were praying for, but invited people at our church, take your phones out right now, open up your settings, set an alarm, recurring, every Tuesday morning at 11:02 or whatever it is. And if there's a scripture that's associated with the numbers, that could be useful. And so, and I've seen other people doing similar prayer prompts on their phones that I thought was a great idea that I heard during a workshop at the International Conference on Missions that I've used personally several times at my church. And so that was one idea. The other idea comes from, I've done it in two different conferences. I've seen it. One was Josh. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Josh Howard at ICOM's 3 or 4 years ago. When you came into the last main session, there was a tag with a string on it on every seat. And they explained it midway through the service that tag, and there was a video that explained the tag, and that was, I don't remember the video, to be honest, but you were to write the name of one person that fit the description of what that video described, that you would then somewhere keep that tag in your purse, where my wife had her tag in her purse for a long time, or in your Bible, or in your wallet, or elsewhere. And it gave you one person to pray for specifically. And it reminds me of that, the resource, the book, Pray for One, that many churches have done the sermon series. Bo Chansey from the church up in Manchester, New Hampshire, wrote the book Pray for One. And so that was the idea there. The other one, I was at a smaller conference. It was a church planting conference, maybe had 60 or 80 people at it. But during the prayer time, you were to meet the person sitting next to you. and asked them 3 or 4 questions that were up on the screen. And we all had 3x5 cards that we were supposed to write down the notes of what we learned about that person, specifically about things they were struggling with or could pray for them. But then you were supposed to keep your card and keep it in a place. And they suggested a place that I still use to this day. Is everybody's got a cell phone these days, and you've got it. Most people have a cover on their cell phone. And so inside my cover is my card from 4 years ago for a gal in ministry that I pray for every time I flip my phone and for any reason fuss with my phone jacket, and I put it back here and I pray for her and remember the things that she asked me to pray for her about. And I will still run into her at conferences and conventions. She lives in a different region, but I'll run into her at Spire. Was the last time I met her was at Spire, and I said, "Hey, I'm still praying for you." And I pulled her card out of my phone jacket and said, "I'm still praying for you. Should we update anything on your card?" And so I thought that was a great idea that will really work at your church, that you could pray for one person in your neighborhood that you're praying for, or you could take the time in service or in a Sunday school class or whatever, and find out one person in your church body that you could be praying for very specifically and very intentionally, and put it in a place that you'll remember, whether it's in your phone jacket or in your, we don't carry Bibles that much anymore. So I guess mine is in my Bible because I use my online Bible most of the time. But that was a great principle that I learned at a conference 3 or 4 years ago, about having that 3x5 card that I've got with me at all times.
I love that idea of having prayer prompts, and they could be all kinds of things. But your phone, I mean, I love that idea of setting alarms to pray for specific times. I've gotten logged into my phone on my calendar when I get up and do my quiet time every day, and it's there, and I'm going to be up and I'm going to be doing. I don't even need the prompt, but it's there to remind me to pray, and that's so very important. I saw a prayer response at the end of a service at a North American. I remember Jim Cymbala was the speaker that day, and I'm pretty sure it was in Arizona. I remember it was whoever thought of having North American in Arizona in July. When it was 482 degrees, and it was, but it was hot, and it was great being in the convention center because it was cold, and you actually had to take a sweater or something inside the convention center. But anyway, I remember that Jim Cymbala had talked about that he had asked permission, and at the end of the service, he asked for people who needed prayer for whatever reason it was. And he talked specifically, if I remember right, about leaders. If you're a leader here and you're struggling, or you got a need, or trying to make a decision, just come down front. And then he said, if anybody that's here in the space would like to pray with these people, you come down too. And there was, I think, soft music probably playing in the background. I don't even remember that, but I remember my wife and I going down and praying over a couple, and there were, I don't know how many, there were several hundred people around the stage. I do recall that. And I thought, I can do that. Had a really good friend of mine asked me one time some years ago, why do we set our services up to fail 85% of the time if our only win is somebody coming forward to be baptized or to place their membership with the church? And we know that in typical services, 85% of the time, we're going to go away and nobody's going to do that. And especially when we've thought we preached a sermon that has just knocked it out of the park, and they're going to come flocking just like at a Billy Graham crusade, and nobody shows up, and then we preach a dud of a sermon and 4 people come, and the Holy Spirit's working in somebody's heart. So what I did, I transferred Cymbala's idea back to my church, and we at the time connected our invitation response. That's when we would ask people to come forward for that. We did communion at the same time, people to come and get the communion elements at the same time. And then we had a prayer cross, a large prayer cross at the front of our auditorium to the side, and people could go there and pray. We always had couples there. elder and wife, so that if a lady came forward, there'd be a lady that would be praying with her. And I, like Simba did that day, prompting people, I would prompt people from time to time to remember to do that. For instance, I recall the time that I just said, if you, everybody had a card on their seat. If you have somebody that you can't imagine going to heaven and not seeing there, would you just write their name down on that card? At the end of the service, I just asked people to, if they'd like to take them to the foot of the cross and just place them there. And as I was busy talking with somebody, I think that wanted to be baptized, I looked over and there were literally probably 30 or 40 people on their knees around that cross praying over people that they want to see saved. But that all came about because of an idea that I had when I was heard Jim Simla preach and his prayer response idea. Well, Mark, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what's going to happen at ICOM related to prayer. You're the prayer chairman for this year's ICOM, and it's going to be at the Richmond Convention Center in our city, and we're looking forward to that in November. So talk to us about a couple of things. Why don't you start off with the virtual prayer walk that you're planning? I just think this is genius.
Well, there are a number of things that we're trying to do, and one of the things that I'm really passionate about is that it just seems like within the context of any convention that prayer ends up getting kind of marginalized. You have a prayer room, but only a few people go, and it's not that people don't want to pray. It's that they go to the display area and they're just interacting with people. They're talking and they're visiting, catching up with old friendships and everything. And pretty soon the day goes by and you just forget about it. Just like we're too busy. We find ourselves getting so busy that we forget to pray. And the idea behind this year's convention is to mobilize more people to pray. And so we're going to be trying to set up a virtual prayer walk that you can go through throughout the entire display area. You're going to have signs with QR codes on them. And whenever you click on those QR codes, you'll be able to see a video of about 2 to 3 minutes at the longest, requesting specific prayer for specific areas in the world and specific needs and specific areas of focus. That isn't the only thing that we're doing, but one of the things that we're trying to do is, instead of 30 or 300 people praying, we want to get 6,000 people who will at least make an effort to mobilize to prayer. I listened to, I went to Life Point down in Toronto just a couple of weeks ago and listened to Phil Murdoch preach. And he said, when we pray, something supernatural happens. He says, don't ask me to explain it, but something supernatural happens because we're entreating the God of the universe to be involved in our affairs. We're entreating him to act on our behalf and with us, and for us to act with him. And so it was a great reminder. It was just a great reminder that we, in order for missions to take place effectively in our country, in our region, and in the world, God's got to be in it or we're toast. And so that's basically the design behind it. We're just trying to get more people involved in that prayer aspect so that the work of God can move forward in power. And so that's one of the things. The other thing that we're doing is on the webpage for ICOM, which is theicom.org. You can go, and every month there is a prayer update of specific things to be praying about. In addition to that, we'll still be having the prayer room. Dave and Kim Butts are putting that together along with Gerard Fess, and who's gathering needed materials here so that they can come in and set it up. And we're going to try for those who aren't there are people who want to pray privately in their prayer rooms, in their hotel rooms or whatever. So what we're going to do is try to take as many of the virtual prayer videos that we have that talk about specific things and have a written summary of them so that people can have them for their personal devotional time and their personal prayer time in their hotel rooms as well. So we're trying to broaden the scope of prayer. And I'm really excited about what the potential is. And I'm praying desperately that everything flows together in a beautiful way to his glory.
Well, Mark, I know that it will, and I know that above and beyond anything you've thought, planned, imagined, that will be the impact. Well, I love the idea of the virtual prayer walk around the area of the display area. I've shared many times with people that as you're walking up and down the booths, and some of them large missions entities and some mom and pop missionaries that are represented there, I've shared with people that every one of those mission outreach, they all started in someone's heart. And I just, with all my heart, believe that most of the time they started in somebody's heart after they'd been on their knees. God, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? Mark, I know you're a son of a missionary in Italy. No question that was central in your family ever even going to Italy. So I'm excited about what you're doing and leading us at ICOM to focus on prayer. Well, folks, I hope that this has been a good evening for you, that you've been able to jot down an idea or two. I read an article back, it's been several years ago, about the huge amount of bucks that companies spend to send their executives to conferences and conventions and that sort of thing. And what the article is about was a tiny return that they get out of that, because most executives come back and never implement anything. They say, yeah, that's a good idea, but they never change or implement anything in their own place. Well, I hope that's not the case for folks as they come to the convention and this year and see ideas, especially ideas of prayer, that they would take them home and implement them in their own space. And I hope that some of the ideas tonight will be helpful for you. Tim, pass it off to you, brother.
All right. Well, I'll share one more idea just for the last tidbit that I haven't seen in practice in the church, but it's relative to ICOM and the display area. When we hosted ICOM in 2015, one of our good partnering churches, actually probably the church that got us started back in 1938, Northside Christian Church in Yorktown, they created little passports of all the missionary organizations that their church supports, and they gave those to kids and other people in their church. And then you could go around the display area and find those missionaries at their booths and have them sign it. And I know that because Waypoint was one of those. And so all these people from Northside were coming up to me in the booth, and they would wait in line if I was talking to somebody else. And then they had a couple of questions to ask, but the last question was, how can we pray for you? And I thought that was great. And to get their people involved in missions and getting to meet all their missionaries and so on. But I thought that could be work at your church as well. I would think if you could get a couple of people that during the service would go to your children's area and say, hi, I'm Tim, and I'm just going around praying for our volunteers. Thanks for serving the 3 and 4 year olds. How could I pray for you? And during that time, they got to watch the kids, but give them a special touch because you've gone from room to room to say, how can I pray for you? I think it'd be a huge impact on your volunteers who are giving their time and energy and attention to serve the Lord's church, is you can care for them in a similar way. So that's the last one that I'll throw in, but I do want to thank everybody that's joined us tonight. I hope that you've heard an idea or two that you could use at your church that would really expand the scope of the kind of prayer covering you have at your church. And so we want to thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to share. There we go. Our next webinar is coming up in a month, women's ministry events that work. We've got a panel of 3 ladies from 3 different churches. They're going to be talking about great ideas of what they're doing to expand the scope of their ministry to women at their church. And I'm excited about this because we had a hard time finding 3 ladies that could say, yeah, I'm willing to share that, because all the ladies that we asked are like, I'd like to know anybody that's doing some good stuff for gals. And so, that should be really good. I also want to invite you to go to our website and subscribe to the Waypoint podcast, which comes out twice a month from leaders within the Waypoint region, telling their stories about how God is using them through their ministry. So Dyke McCord and Becca Hott from our staff lead that podcast twice a month. And so they've been doing that since January. So we're about 12 podcasts in, and they've all been great, different stories, different people, different ministries, and a lot to learn. Well, again, we want to thank our ministry sponsor, our webinar sponsor, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, who's been our sponsor from day one, serving churches in the region just like we do. And we hope that you will join us in the future, and that you'll also go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've doubled the number of subscriptions during COVID, and we will see some of our webinars that now have several hundred views after the fact, that the people that subscribe see a new, if you hit not only the subscribe button, but the little bell, then you get a notice every time a new webinar is posted, and you can decide to watch that or even share it, forward it to a friend. So we hope to see you at an upcoming webinar or through our YouTube channel. And I hope you have a great evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks, Neil and Mark, for your 110 years of ministry. Between you, I've just been 10 years. I'm early in. And so thanks for joining us tonight, and the leadership that both of you have in our region, elevating the prayer ministries from so many churches in our region. So I'm thankful for you guys both that are the leaders in our region in that particular area. Thanks for your influence.